We've been covering it all night. It has been a tense few days in the city of Los Angeles as protests over immigration raids have boiled over into a battle of what is the president's authority. That battle stemming from President Trump's decision to federalize the California National Guard and deploy Marines to the city this afternoon. California is suing President Trump's administration over this. Now, this is not the first time the federal government has gone around state authority to deploy National Guard troops. But it was 60 years ago the last time it happened, and that time it was under very different circumstances. Here's Kent Erdahl.
After days of escalating tensions on the streets of Los Angeles and in our country's halls of power, California's Attorney General officially filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration, writing, "Federalizing the California National Guard is an abuse of the president's authority under the law, and not one we take lightly. We're asking a court to put a stop to the unlawful, unprecedented order."
I think that the lawsuit will raise some very interesting points. It's unclear it will go anywhere.
U of M political science professor and Supreme Court expert Tim Johnson says a lawsuit is unlikely to move fast enough to resolve the current conflict on the streets of Los Angeles, but it could eventually clear up questions about the limits of a president's power under something known as Title X.
What it says is that the president can call out the National Guard if three circumstances: the U.S. has been invaded, if there is insurrection, or if protests of any kind would stop the United States from carrying out federal law.
Johnson says that last point is likely what led to the deployment of hundreds of troops in Los Angeles.
That idea of ICE not being able to carry out federal law is all the president believes he needed to call out the troops, and he did so.
How did you find out that the President of the United States was going to usurp your authority and deploy your National Guard here in California?
I got a call from a staffer. No heads up whatsoever.
In an interview with NBC Today, California's governor pushed back on the president's justification, arguing the protests didn't escalate until after the troops were sent in.
Local law enforcement had no needs. They were not requesting any additional resources. He made this up. This is a manufactured crisis in order to get under the tent to start to stretch credulity and to begin the process of moving inevitably towards a constitutional questioning crisis around posse comitatus.
The posse comitatus law says that the U.S. military cannot engage in police functions on U.S. soil, that only local or state police officers can do so. The military is not allowed to do that.
The last time a president invoked Title X without a governor's approval was in Alabama in 1965 for the Selma to Montgomery March for voting rights.
President Johnson, in that case, sent in the National Guard without Governor Wallace's consent to protect the protesters, not to protect federal agents of any kind. This was to make sure that the march on Selma was going to be conducted without having the protesters be harmed by local law enforcement. So that's the big difference.
In comments today, the president himself made that clear.
The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators, they're insurrectionists, they're bad people, they should be in jail.
Now, that comment from the president raised eyebrows today, using the word insurrectionists. That's worth watching because so far he has not tried to invoke the Insurrection Act, which could give troops the ability to take on those law enforcement duties, at least in theory. But Jana, it would also require clearing a much bigger legal hurdle in the courts, something not a lot of scholars believe would be possible in the case of what we're seeing in Los Angeles.
A legal hurdle to even declare the Insurrection Act?
He could declare it and maybe try to go forward, but that would clearly get the court's attention and there would be some very high-profile litigation very quickly.
Okay. Kent, thanks so much for getting us up to speed on what's going on. We'll be right back.